Namaste. In this video, we will be covering an introduction to inequalities. So what is an inequality? This is a statement that is used to express a relationship where one value is smaller, larger, or different from another. Throughout this video, we will be going over 5 different inequalities: greater than, less than, not equal to, less than or equal to, and greater than or equal to. One important thing to note is that an inequality never includes an equals symbol, which looks something like this. So if I said something like 5 is equal to 5, that would not be an example of an inequality. Only the symbols that you see over here are examples of inequalities. Let's first look at the greater than inequality. This says that the number on the left is greater or larger than the number on the right. An example would be x is greater than 5. This inequality tells us that x can be values like 6, 7, 8, 9, and so on, but it cannot be values less than 5. An important thing to note about this inequality is that it does not include values equal to 5, so x cannot be 5. Another example would be 6 is greater than 3. In this case, we know that this inequality is true because the value of 6 is larger than the value of 3. What about the less than inequality? This tells us that the value on the left is smaller than or less than the value on the right. An example would be x is less than 7. This is telling us that x can include values such as 6, 5, 4, 3, and so on. We can also reword this to say that 7 is greater than x. Note that this inequality does not include values equal to 7, nor does it include values greater than 7, like 8, 9, and so on. Another example would be 4 is less than 6. This inequality is true because we know that 4 is smaller than 6. So the greater than or equal to inequality tells us that the value on the left is equal to or larger than the value on the right. So you may be wondering, how is this different from the greater than inequality? Well, let's look at this with an example. If I said that x is greater than or equal to 4, this would tell me that x can be equal to 4 and it can also be larger than 4. And that's because of this inequality. So I could have 4, I could have 5, 6, 7, and so on. Another example would be 2 is greater than or equal to 2. Okay, remember that this is or equal to. So if I said that 2 is greater than or equal to 2, that would hold this inequality to be true. The less than or equal to inequality is very similar to the one we just covered. It tells us that the value on the left can be smaller than or the same as the value on the right. An example would be x is less than or equal to 10. This tells us that x can be 10, and it can also be values less than 10, like 9, 8, 7, and so on. And remember that this is true because it is less than or equal to. Another example would be 1 is less than or equal to 3. As we know, 1 is smaller than 3, and therefore this inequality is also true. Our last and final inequality is not equal to. This tells us that the value on the left is not the same as the value on the right. It's that simple. Let's say, for example, that I wrote down 3 is not equal to 5. That would satisfy this inequality because, as we know, 3 is not the same value as 5. Another simple example would be that A is not equal to B. We know that A and B are different variables, and so they are not the same unless specified. Now that we've learned about all 5 different inequalities, let's try out these practice problems. I highly encourage all of you to pause the video before I reveal the solutions. Okay, so the first one tells us that 7 is greater than 5. We know that this is true because 7 is indeed larger than 5. Second one tells us 6 is less than or equal to 6. Remember that as long as both values are the same or the value on the left is less than the right, it is true. So therefore, this is true. The third one tells us that 10 is greater than 10. We know that this is false because greater does not include equal to. It only includes values that are strictly larger than the opposite side. So it could be things like 11, 12, 13, and so on. So number 3 is false. Number 4 tells us that 4 is greater than or equal to 3. This is true because we know that 4 is larger than 3. The fifth one tells us that 7 is less than 2. We automatically know that this is false because 2 is not greater than 7. It's quite the opposite. So for 6, this is true. For 7, this is false. For 8, this is true. For 9, this is true. And for 10, this is false.